Welcome back to Career Tea, where we spill the truth on what careers are really like straight from the people living them. Today, I'm sitting down with Alison Upton, a creative and a strategist who's worked her way up from graphic design into product and brand marketing. With a BFA in graphic design from RIT, she's held roles from multimedia designer to senior marketing operations specialist at Ottobock, and now leads brand and product marketing at Brain Robotics, a company pushing boundaries in assistive technology. We'll talk about the shift from creative to operations, what it's like to work in health tech and robotics, and how she's built a career that bridges both visual storytelling and strategy. Alison, welcome to Career Tea. It's great to have you here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, I'm so excited to get to know a little bit about your background, your career path, and then learn a little bit about what you do now and where you're at now. So let's rewind a little bit back to the beginning of your journey to the starting in undergrad, your building blocks. You went to RIT and studied graphic design there. I want to know what brought you to RIT as well as what got you interested in studying graphic design.
Yeah, so when I was younger as a kid, I've always been in the arts, doing dance, musicals, and then just drawing was a huge thing for me. I kind of fluctuated on what I wanted to do. Maybe it was like architecture, but ultimately picked graphic design because of my artistic background, but wanting to have a technical aspect of it, be a bit more applicable. Obviously, it's pretty well known that fine artists kind of have a bit of just kind of making it in the real world. So graphic design was a mesh of technology and the arts. So yeah, I got into that. Picked RIT because of the high percentage of job rate after college. I didn't really find it useful to go to like a fine arts school specifically, and then maybe not get placed in a job afterwards. Whereas RIT was pretty well known. I think had really good reputation. Also was a general, like more general school than just an art school. So that diversity for me, I think, was pretty important as well.
Definitely.
I didn't want it to be solely, just art students. I really kind of liked that more expanded diversity of like who you get in contact with. It was a very techy school though, more techy than I had probably realized, but I also really liked the little bubble that it was in. So I looked at like Syracuse, which is kind of close by, but I didn't like that it was kind of in the city. So RT was a nice little bubble. So all of those things combined, that's kind of why I picked it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
When
but
when you look back at, now that you've gone through RIT, do you like the choice that you made of going through their program, or do you wish you had gone to a different school?
I think ultimately I really did like the program. I think it definitely taught me a lot. I liked, the people there. I also really kind of like actually liked the Greek life at RIT. It wasn't the classic Southern Greek life. It's where it's a huge thing down south. It's like your bread and butter. It's like your whole world. Whereas I could still be part of Greek life. A lot of those people were really down to earth. It wasn't as intense, but then still do all my schools and my studies. And I think the design program also at RT was pretty good. A lot of the kind of artsy programs was really great. I think it balanced out the technology side. That's kind of something that RT was supposed to be known for, was that design aspect or just like the arts in general, right? Not just the technology side.
Yeah, before when you were in high school, like a senior, and you're looking at colleges and you're choosing graphic design, when you went through IT, did that perception of what you had previously, did it match your experiences going through school?
I don't really think I had expectations, honestly. I think when you're someone who's going into college, you really don't know what to expect. It's definitely a huge move to go from, your little maybe hometown high school to think about like going to a college and what you're gonna do. It's so hard to know what you think you're gonna do, and it's so hard to understand the job market, careers, career paths. Oh, sorry, there's a fly. And so I really wasn't 100% sure. Like you look into it when you're younger and you try to figure out maybe what you want, but you really don't know at the end of the day. You just try to make your best guess, unless you really had experience early on or were in contact with adults or maybe people at a different age that really were able to help you. The concept of a job and a career, it's just so beyond you. So going to school, trying to get a degree, it's a very vague concept. At least it was for me. And you just try your best to pick what you think you're going to do. at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully a platform like CareerT helps students that are maybe like not 100% sure figure out what they want to do. Hopefully it gives them some insight. So while you were going through your undergrad at RIT, what kind of like projects or internships were you getting involved in within graphic design? If someone's listening and they're wondering what they're going to be doing, what's their coursework is like, or even an internship, what was that experience like for you?
I mean, the coursework, there were some basic fundamentals like drawing, graphic design, and just like basic classes. But then as you get a little bit into more of the program, you start doing bigger based projects and they try to incorporate some more like real life world aspects. So I remember couple of big projects were with big brand names. One was with a design firm who was working with Nintendo Switch. I did a packaging class as a group, as a team. That's another big thing is like as you get further along the lines, you start doing more group projects as ultimately you're not going to just be a one-off designer most of the time unless you're doing contract work. So you're usually working with a team. So as a team, we created packaging, unique packaging for the Switch, Nintendo Switch. And then on a similar vein, we also did something with iRobot, all of the robot vacuums, also creating packaging for that and like redesigning it. So those are some fun projects that I really enjoyed. And then kind of in your senior year, you then start going back into solo projects where you are creating a whole kind of like beginning to end development of maybe like an app, some sort of kind of like concept of an app, the branding, and then designing what it would look like, marketing, all that stuff. So you go through that full start to finish. So those are really good. I think they really did help kind of understanding like almost that beginning understanding of like when you start a project to the end and like working with the team in some phases, but then also just being able to do everything on your own. Independence is good. As for internships, I had a couple. I had one through a connection from, I think, one of my sorority sisters. I was just kind of like a general marketing intern working on some of the marketing material or just like design spec sheets. So that was pretty applicable and did help me actually for one of my future jobs. And then the other one was through, it was a learning, I think, computer technology software where people take classes. I think it's learning software of some sort. And I helped to design those courses for them. And that was pretty interesting. That was pretty cool. I don't think I would say it helped me a whole bunch in any particular way other than just having a job in the middle
Yeah.
of the summer, just to say that you had something and you had experience.
Well,
But those two,
no, I was gonna say, well, do you think that having that internship, for example, that like experience, do you think that helped you after graduation of kind of getting your foot in the door of landing your first job?
That's hard to say. I mean, I would hope so. I think just saying that you got in front of the ball to start working at an internship or getting an internship definitely is a good idea. And I think at the end of the day, it's just good to get practice getting those internships ahead of when you do get a full-time job because you will kind of understand what that process looks like ahead of time and it's not new right off the bat. Plus, internships do lead to full-time gigs for a lot of people. So it's just really good to do something during the summer to get the experience, get a little extra pay, get some real world life, just like job experiences, and then just maybe at least a future potential job in the future, or just might lead you to like another pathway. I definitely think at least my internship at this one, like technology company did help me with getting a job in the future, but I don't know if they necessarily saw like, oh, she got an internship. So like, that's awesome. I don't know if that necessarily was
Yeah.
like the internship itself, but it did, I think, lead to ultimately a different job
So
or a new job
if you
opportunity.
were to like weigh projects and internships, would you say they have pretty much the same effect? Maybe even projects might have a little bit more effect of kind of showing the interviewers like how much you know your skill set and whatnot.
I think it depends on what career you're wanting to go down. And that's hard to just like trying to pick out a college and what you want to do with life. Picking a job and a career path, you just don't know. Sometimes they would give these classes and have people speak, and you're like, wow, that sounds cool, but do I really want to do that? Is that something I want to go down? But I will say, right, if you're just trying to get a job, yes, go for an internship. But if you're like looking for a more particular job career and you know what you want, sometimes that will require a very particular portfolio, in which case you can cater. So I'm trying to think of like maybe game design. If you don't ever get an internship at a game design company, but that's what you want to do, your portfolio will probably be a bit more strong in comparison to probably an internship. Well, maybe a couple together, but obviously if you didn't have that experience in your portfolio or in your internships, then that's where your portfolio can help and buff that out.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, after RAT, your first full-time role was a junior digital designer. What was that transition like going from a student to now becoming a full-time professional work?
Definitely wasn't very gloriful or didn't have the glory as what you would think it would have when you got a full-time job after. And it actually did take me a while to transition into a role in my field. So right out of college, I moved to Indianapolis with a previous partner and couldn't find anything. I just don't think the job market there for designers were very good in general. So I was serving for a while. Then the pandemic happened, and I realized, there's probably nothing much for me up in Indianapolis, and I had heard about Austin. So picking where you move to will definitely affect your career. So just something to think about. At the time, I didn't know, so I was fine going there. But when I realized, all right, I want to actually start progressing my career, I made the move to go to Austin, where it's very well known to be a tech hub and have a lot of job opportunities. I didn't technically go straight to Austin right away. I knew a friend in San Antonio, so that's where I found the job ultimately. And I just got the first job that, I could get. And it was kind of just like a pretty minimal gig at like a small like agency, and it was all right. It wasn't, very high paying. It was definitely below what, you should get as a starting base salary. But, I did make it work out, did make it work, and it was good just to start to get my foot in the door. And just know at the end of the day, your first jobs are probably not going to be the most gloriful. They're just going to be sometimes grunt work. You might not get the best manager or supervisor, or just like higher ups, but you kind of just got to make it work, and you just kind of got to go get through at least a year-ish to get in your resume and say you've gotten something just so you can progress. Definitely it's first few years are going to be a little bit harder, not fun necessarily, but you just got to push through it.
Yeah, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, I guess, right? So that
Yeah.
role that you had was at ESD and Associates. And as you said, that was a good building block, as you said, kind of getting your foot in the door, getting some experience. And I feel like your next role is probably at Autobock is where your career really started to develop and evolve. So you started there as a multimedia designer and then transitioned into marketing operation roles. So that's a pretty big shift, right? Tell me
Yeah.
about how you went to kind of get that role or get your foot in the door at Autobock. And what was that transition like going from company where you said you were doing minimal work to now going to a bigger company, more responsibility? What's that shift like?
Yeah, so I started off the designer, coming in with the experience in my previous role and being confident. And then as I started building my foundation at the new job, they kind of started giving me extra work slash project. And I was working on this project to basically onboard the new print and distributor vendor. So we were doing that transition. My manager pulled me in just to kind of like help out. But as we did it, she leaned on me more, and I kind of kept that work or took on that work happily, as it was like, I was excited to expand my experience and do different work. So as that happened, we also did have another team member step down and did create a really good opportunity. The combination of helping her with this extra project and then someone else stepping down, they basically created that operations role kind of for me. It was more just kind of to fill in the gap a little bit. Basically, this one role that he was doing, the person that had left was a pretty big role, so they kind of divided that role out. So I got some of that role, kept a little bit of some of the design work, which was working with the vendor underneath my scope. But then I was doing like all these other operational things. And so that really introduced a lot of other skills, different type of work. I was no longer doing project-based work as a designer where you're getting like, spec sheets or brochures. I'm now getting, I'm becoming a tool manager, a process manager. I'm owning these certain projects now that were different from just being kind of like a individual contributor. I'm now becoming kind of a project management lead, a tool lead, the person to become the go-to for certain things. And so I started gaining a lot of responsibility at the end of the day. And I was really excited to. And I was really excited to go out of design, but at the same time scared because you have this whole concept of thinking, oh, I went to school for this one particular degree, but I'm kind of straying away from it. And I had a little bit of like a identity crisis, so to speak. But at the same time, I was just enjoying it and letting the job change happen. And I learned not necessarily like design anymore, but I was learning a lot of like real world skill sets, like the soft skill sets of being in a job and learning how to deal with office relationships, working with people, working cross functionally. I wasn't in my own little bubble anymore. In this new role led to a lot of interdisciplinary work with other people and then communicating with them and also getting a larger understanding of the company itself.
When you started there, right, you said you were more in design. What are some of the projects that you are working on? And you said it was a lot of like solo type work as well, right?
Yeah, basically, so the company needed someone to manage and update spec sheets, brochures, posters, some of the digital ads as well. So I was like doing a lot of content creation, and being the only one who does it, you're kind of like a solo contributor in that respect. So you go back and forth between edits between people, and then you produce like the final product so that they can release it in some other way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now, as you kind of, went up the roles at Ottobock, you eventually were promoted to senior marketing operations specialist. And as you just mentioned, your responsibilities just went up. You were managing a lot more. Which, I guess, type of work did you enjoy more, right? Because you said in the beginning you were in design, doing a lot of design work. Later on, it was more about managing and kind of broadened your skill set and kind of went away from design. But which type of work were you enjoying more?
I honestly was enjoying my operations role a lot more. It was very stressful though because I shifted completely how I worked, and the type of work. And so I had to go into this new transition of switching how I worked in many ways. And so it was very stressful. Plus I was onboarding the next designer who got hired after me. So it was a very stressful time, and kind of a reinvention of myself. But I did enjoy it just because I guess it really activated my brain in a new way. It was a lot more logical, problem solving. And I've always had that about myself. I've been both creative and logical. Growing up, people kind of expect me to go into more an artistic way or artistic path. So that's kind of what I went with. But knowing that I could go into something else and pivot was very eye opening for me. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed this other work and I could go down this path and I wasn't actually limited to the degree that I had. Definitely, hopefully, will still be a part of me in some aspect of whatever I do, but knowing that I'm not limited to that was really nice.
Absolutely. Do you have any advice for someone at their company, let's say they're just starting out, for how they can grow internally and kind of like climb up the ladder and different, grow in their position?
Definitely, it does involve kind of taking on more than beyond your role, and it's a very delicate balance of don't take on too much to the point where, you're doing you're forsaking your mental health and like your workload. But if you're able to and you're presented the opportunity to take on additional work and responsibility that's not going to, push you over the edge, it's definitely worth it. Especially if you can work with other people, definitely take the opportunity to expose yourself to more people, get to know what other people are doing, kind of understanding also the inner works of the departments and the company, just not being, secluded, really just trying to reach out and extend yourself really goes a long way. Because there were other times where I applied to possible other jobs internally in the company as well. Didn't get them, and that's okay. But it just means like, right, if they know who you are, they're willing to maybe hire you on. And then you also get known within the company by other people, maybe even by higher ups. And so pushing your name, pushing your face and marketing yourself is really actually very important. It's very hard to do in the beginning when you're first, getting your feet. But if you can do it, and you're given the opportunity to just kind of keep expanding yourself and you have that growth mindset, it will definitely help you. Because it's really, my manager was saying, it's not very common to see that. People will go to a job or get hired onto a job, do their job, and that's kind of it. They don't really do much beyond that. And within good reason, there's a mentality going around where, kind of like that quiet quitting, just do what you're being told to. And that's great, especially if you're getting paid lower. But at the end of the day, there's no growth without the opportunities. And you just got to take those opportunities sometimes, even if it means, not getting the pay that maybe you should get.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, after Ottobock, it brings us to your current role as a product marketing and brand manager at Brain Robotics. So tell me a little bit about what Brain Robotics does and then also what you do there currently.
Yeah, so both Autobock and Brain Robotics are prosthetics companies. Autobock does everything. They do prosthetics and orthotics, whereas Brain Robotics is a kind of a new and up and coming, technically competitor to Autobock, but Autobock has gone into the customer services with patient care services, whereas Brain Robotics will stay primarily in the manufacturing of prosthetics. We'll maybe go into orthotics at some point, but we're solely focused on prosthetics primarily because we have connections and resources that will eventually lead us down a path of integrating biotech and possibly AI into our prosthetic products. And that is something that's really, really cool and is kind of right what you would think the next phase of at least the medical device industry will go into with all of this AI, right? And also integrating technology and biomechanics together. Like it just is kind of the direction that it makes sense to go into with everything happening. So that direction is something that I'm really proud to be part of in the future that we'll get to. And so that's something that's really exciting. Something with my current role. So I do product and brand managing. It was a little bit of a hybrid role just because they need a little bit of help on the branding side. But I want to get into product managing, but I don't really technically have like the background for that. So this was something that was kind of a godsend for me where either if I want to get into the product marketing space, as I was being like, what do I do after product operations? I thought about product and I was like, do I take a course or do I try to do like an assistant product manager role? Just, kind of downgrade just so I can do like a longevity upgrade. So this role, they were like, hey, we are looking for someone to, do and help out with some product, but also we need help with brand management. So they had this role and it was a really great opportunity. And that it was only because I actually reached out to a previous coworker from Ottobock who did move over to Brain Robotics and reached out to him and leveraging that networking aspect, just putting myself out there and just be like, hey, I saw this role. And so we got talking and it got me into the interview process, obviously. And so that's just been a really great godsend, and a really great opportunity where they're willing to hire me on because they wanted more of a culture fit as opposed to maybe the technical fit, knowing that at least I have the medical device industry background because that's a really huge, I would say, hump to get over for a lot of people. So once you're in it, you have that kind of leeway. And so that was been an easy way for me to pivot job roles in the same industry because the industry knowledge is actually sometimes a little bit more important than maybe the technical aspect.
Yeah, connections and networking go such a long way. And I feel like I get that recurring theme from all my guests that they land jobs or internships from just networking and connections. So that's awesome. So some of the, I guess, the work that you were saying that Brain Robotics does, you said that they're trying to kind of evolve and develop their products to integrate with AI and the growing technology. Do their products currently, or is this something maybe they're trying to reach to, for example, like a prosthetic arm that would just move with my thoughts? Is that something that Brain Robotics can currently do? Is that something that came to my mind, or is that something they're trying to work towards developing? I'm thinking like with like AI and technology.
So it's not something we currently offer. We just only actually offer one MPK knee, but that is definitely a direction that we allegedly are going towards. I can't really give like a full
Yeah, yeah.
picture, but that is something that we are kind of putting out there, but we're not being loud quite yet because it is going to be like a long process
Yeah,
to go down.
of course.
But yeah.
Yeah. From your design background, right, from all the skills that you've gained going through your, design undergrad schooling, as well as your first role that was in design to now managing, cutting edge products and, that regard evolve technology, how has your creative eye helped you in leadership and strategy, your current role?
I'll be honest, I really don't know if it's helped too much other than the company itself needed someone to help with the brand creative strategy. I think it helps me understand, I guess, strategy in general. The idea and concept of why we do things in a visual sense can lead to an actionable sense. So, for example, the colors you pick, the fonts that you pick, they have to be geared towards a reason to why. Like, is it going to be futuristic or is it going to be more retro? That decision making is a strategy. And that's something I learned in my previous role. And so when you think about that visually, you can apply it to kind of more project sense or business sense. That business acumen can be, I guess, maybe transferable. So from a business standpoint, why are we doing the things that we're doing? Why are we going into this market? Why are we creating a product that's going to do X, Y, Z? And how is that going to, shape the identity that we are creating as a new brand? That's definitely probably been, a good archway into that. But the design skills that I got necessarily weren't actually probably what was more applicable. It's more just like the conceptual, the ideas, the thoughts. And that is something you learn in corporate world is the big guys up top get paid for their thoughts as opposed to the actual like actionable work,
Yeah,
sadly.
I hear you. Now, to kind of wrap up our talk here onto the last few questions, what's one career moment or a career decision that you can remember that kind of changed your trajectory or maybe set you up for where you're at now?
I don't think there was like a particular event, other than at the end of the day, having a really good manager really can do a lot for you, creates a lot more flexibility and opportunity than you other would have. I don't think I would have gone into operations and now like product marketing and product branding, um, without the trust of my previous manager who saw what I could do, my capabilities, gave me that boost in confidence and presented the opportunity of a new role and allowed me to do the things I needed to do, allowed me more ownership and more responsibility, and gave me the confidence to keep building up and just allowing me to grow, and not being someone who stopped me and told me I couldn't do this or couldn't do that, or, didn't want me to pivot in a different direction. So that is something that's really important and I know can really stumble someone because being able to move or up laterally diagonally can be very restricting depending on like who you work under. So that was something I was very, very lucky to have in my career. And I hope everyone gets that because it really will go a long way,
Yeah,
especially in
absolutely.
the beginning of your career.
Yeah, a lot of people have like imposter syndrome, and I feel like having a good manager can also help with kind of getting over imposter syndrome and kind of building your confidence in your first role, as you said. Now, the next question I asked is from all my guests. Do you have a favorite book or a book suggestion for listeners to read?
I really don't, honestly. I really just listen to videos on YouTube or even just like just random people honestly on YouTube who talk about their career experiences and pivots, also how much they're making. I really get very invested on like how someone pivots. And so I really love this podcast that you've created to show, right, exactly what I was like looking for early on is like, what are other people doing? When you move after college and you are on your own, some people go and move away where they don't know much of anyone. And that was me moving down to Texas. I only knew like one person and that was it. And then you're like, well, what are other people doing? And you lose touch with the people from college and you might see what people are doing and you might stalk their LinkedIn, but really hearing what other people are doing, especially since I'm a visual and auditory learner, listening to the podcasts or videos is really great to hear a more personal aspect of like what other people are doing and it really widens your horizon of like what's out there and what you can do. So I think that's way more important, honestly, than reading a book or such. And then, yeah, finding a podcast like this is super helpful. So I hope more and more people will listen to this type of stuff.
Hopefully we're growing and hopefully we'll grow even bigger. Now, to the last question, I made the most important, and maybe you've covered this a little bit earlier in our episode. If you had to give one piece of advice to a designer or a marketing student figuring out their path, or even a young professional who wants to pivot towards this career field, what would your advice be?
Like someone from design who wants to move into like product or operations? Is that what you're
I
asking?
Yeah, either a student right now who's in graphic design or somebody who wants to break into graphic. Like they're already a young professional, they want to pivot complete careers. Let's say they're in business and they want to pivot into graphic design. What advice would you have for them to be successful?
I guess you gotta just start. You gotta start with a job and figure out what you do or don't like. And I would say try moving different roles and positions or companies. I don't think it really does anyone any good to stay in a particular role slash company for, X number of years, 1 to 2 tops, because how do you know what you like unless you try it out? So it's not necessarily advice for someone who wants to like get into what I'm doing. This was really just happenstance. It's more like if you want to pivot in general, just try different things and just be open to what you could do and listen to what other people are doing. Like just don't limit yourself at the end of the day if you want to pivot. It's really almost like a mental game. If you want to go out and do like sales, for example, just apply, just do it, see what other people are doing. And just go for it. It's definitely hard, but if you can also pivot in your company that you're at currently, like I did, that's even better because then you don't have to go through the whole job application process. So see if you can pivot internally too and see what that looks like, because that might be even easier than trying to pivot to a whole new role. But also controversially, you could pivot into a new role at a different company because they might see more potential in you. It just kind of depends. But in general, my advice, yeah, is just to keep learning and trying new things and trying new opportunities.
Well, Allison, thank you so much for your advice to our listeners, and thank you so much for sharing your journey, your undergrad studies, and your career path, and how you are where you are today. And I'm sure our listeners will take away a lot of information and insight from this episode, and hopefully, maybe it will motivate somebody to either pivot to graphic design or even come work for Brain Robotics. Hopefully, we'll have you back on again, maybe in a year, 2 years, and see how your career is progressing and unfolding. And we'll speak to you soon again.
Thank you so much.